So we have Carlsen versus Firouzja, the quarterfinals of the Freestyle Go Challenge. So Carlsen just won the first game. We're waiting for the second game of the quarterfinals to begin. So a really exciting game where apparently Firouzja had a draw, but a difficult scenario with that knight floating around. Let me make sure it's actually coming through this time. Start sending video. Okay. That's weird. Okay, seems like it's coming through now. So we have Magnus versus Firouzja, Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja in the Freestyle Goat Chess Challenge, February 12th, 2024. And Firouzja just lost the first game of the quarterfinals. So this was interesting, where apparently he had a draw, easier said than done. But you can see the eval changing right here when the knight made a blunderous move by just kind of walking into harm's way. So let's see, what was the time? Well, he was down to 15 seconds versus 51 seconds. So understandable that he'd blunder. And let's check this out really quick before we jump into before round 2 begins of our quarterfinals. I'm not sure exactly when, probably within a few minutes, I think, a little break. So, but yeah, this fascinating scenario here. Well, let's take a quick look at how they got here. But of course, yeah, first Magnus will have black and then he'll have white in the next game. So we'll take a look at that position. But yeah, that's the blunder. So he just has to retreat, he just has to retreat maybe here, I think, to E1 or B2. Let's take a look at what's the computer. Well, I think this one, if you can make E1 work, I think is that more logical? Well, if you go to B2, the idea, I think, is to be able to wrap back to D1, but you just have to be so cautious. It's one of the scenarios like in the Magnus game yesterday, where who did he lose to? Abbasatarov, and it was like, okay, well, it was 2 pawns against 1. It's like, well, in a rook and pawn endgame, so theoretically it's a draw, but it's just one of those scenarios where the 2 connected past pawns, you got to be so cautious here as well. Okay, so Magnus is up a pawn, and it's a fixed pawn. I mean, maybe there's some chances to sack the knight and then try and draw with a wing pawn, with the H pawn, and the bishop's on the wrong color to support it. So, but those are kind of far-fetched. And let's see, is it coming through clearly? It looks like we are good this time. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm waiting for the next round to begin too. But let's take a quick look. So this is the pivotal moment. Okay, so right now it says he's fine. I guess he got a little off course. Okay, so there you go. Right, he's hanging the knight, allowing for the capture, and seeing this will become a draw here. So let's see. We would wait around. Okay, so we can let him go win our pawn. Just do whatever you want. We could be here. We can go in the corner. It doesn't matter. No matter what happens, insta draw. That's an instant draw right there. So this is nearly instant draw. All you do is you wait. Elementary. You can do it with your eyes closed as long as you make a legal move. Either here or here. One of these corner squares. And it's just a draw because if you're aware of the basic endgame theory, if you have a wing pawn, you need the rook to be in the, rather the bishop in this case, to be on the same color as the promotion square. So if it's on the the A file, that would be a draw. I mean, this would be a win. This is a draw on the H file. There we go. So, okay, we'll call it the old-fashioned, so we don't get confused. Well, this is the king rook file, and this is the queen rook file, right? In that sense, it actually could be less confusing. Anyhow, let's take a look at the original position. So we begin with a pretty interesting scenario where we have the 2 bishops and 2 knights next to each other, the duos. I kind of like when it's like that. It's always fun when the bishops begin kind of fianchettoed from the corners too. But it's very easy to develop, in a scenario like this. Just move your knights in, and you either fianchetto, maybe you do like a sort of orangutan type thing where the bishop, extended fianchetto, or you could just keep it tight and go, look at it from Magnus's side, it doesn't symmetrical, right? But like b6, c5, and just tuck your bishops in there, and the knights could come out when they want. You can also just take the central approach, and it'll be very easy to castle as well. We just move our g8/g1 knight, and we castle immediately. King just swings over to g8, rook stays there on f8, and vice versa. Let's see how they approach it. So just going straight for the queen and the bishop, opening up, kind of English style by Firouzja. There you go. So actually now it would be like a ready. So we can compare it to a system. Of course it's different, but to something at least we can latch onto, which would be a ready system. which would be, you know, like knight f3, and you often go c4, and you'd go b4 if you can. And it would make like a reversed Benoni difficult. Anyway, we'll talk about it in its own right. But, you know, but in essence, it would be, you know, for example, it's hard to achieve, you know, c5, because you would take with a wing pawn and get rid of the c pawn, get more center, because this would have influence over the center, but get rid of the c pawn. Or if he tries to, you know, go like get d5 and d4, and well, it's going to be very difficult to support it with c5, and that pawn might be kind of flailing about, and we could punch at it with e3 and force that pawn to you know, to just have to liquidate. And what's the point? Black would be wasting time in an effort to push the d pawn, and then he just has to trade it off. So why did you waste your time? White's just going to blow it up, and black already has the second move as it is, and the two pawn moves immediately open the bishops, right? So we have this kind of interesting, like, extended dual sort of fianchetto, you know, both sort of, you know, almost fianchettoing this bishop too, just on the other side of the board. And they would be beautiful working together. So we probably don't want to castle kingside. It almost reminds me of a bird, you know, to toss this in, and you have bishop b2, and then sometimes you have, like in the famous Lasker double bishop sack game, get two bishops. So, well, it's interesting because he'd be, you know, just envisioning hypotheticals. You castle kingside, pretty scary. You don't really want to go queenside either, because you have a pawn storm impending, right? This looming pawn storm. So it's like, what do you do? All right, kind of difficult scenario. Okay, so how does it unfold? He actually does that. Interesting. Okay. Says, all right, you take my c pawn, I get your h pawn. Well, that's going to be tough. It's very interesting, actually. It's a smart idea, because now white's not going to castle kingside, and he definitely doesn't want to go queenside either. So it's the kind of thing where he's like, okay, well, I have three central pawns. Again, it reminds me of orangutan with the b4 thing, where you have all these central pawns, and you just sometimes sit there. Interesting. So obviously the knight's hanging, so he's probably going to bring out the knight to g3, and he brings the other knight out. Funny enough, it's like, oh, dubious move. Knight at g3 is, I mean, does it make a huge difference? I don't know. Now he's inviting Magnus to take the pawn. That looks a little sketchy, doesn't it? Is he going to get trapped? I think. What would happen there? It looks very uncomfortable. Let me check the computer eval on that. It doesn't actually. It's just uncomfortable, you know, because she can retreat, but then just gets the pawn back anyway if he wants. So let's see. That's interesting. Okay, let's say you try and trap the rook. Just stays there. You can't really attack it because there's no knight h5. That's a weird situation. I mean, that's chess 960. We get these kind of bizarre situations. Okay. Interesting. So he's like, all right, I'm willing to part with the h-pawn. I'm not going to get to castle, probably. My king is just going to hang out in the center with his three protected pawns. Hey, no, actually, you never know. I mean, let's say the queen goes back. Certainly you could castle and go knight g3, but then I think he'll, like, ram his h-pawn. So it's tricky. It's like, okay, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And now I mentioned the two bishops are clearly going to be able to attack on the diagonals toward the king side. That doesn't mean he can't castle king side. I mean, he has some adequate protection. So he might do it. Let's see. So he chips at the pawn on c5. Takes, and Firouzja's going all out. Pawn storm. Takes the file with tempo, b file against the queen. Knight g4, okay. Annoying move. I'm not sure where's it going to go otherwise. I mean, it's a little loose, but, you know, you can easily guard it with h5 and tempt him to move the f pawn eventually. And, you know, you can always wrap around. It can come back easily to f5, you know, let the bishop guard it, or the g pawn or something like that. So that seems fine. A little wrap. You know, I don't know. It's kind of tricky, but, well, clearly he's not going at the knight yet. And again, you could easily go d6. We're going to go d6, kind of Fischer style, that famous Fischer game where his opponent just goes for like the 4-pawn attack and he just smashes, you know, c5, d6, and that would open up the bishop, simultaneously guarding the knight. I like it. So I'm liking it for black in terms of hyper-modern approach. Oh, by the way, since he has immediate pressure on e5, you can't go d5. You just lose the, looks like, yeah, you just lose it. You can guard it if you need to, multiple ways. Interesting. Now, and also, this h-pawn's hanging similarly to the way that white's h-pawn was hanging. The king rook pawn is hanging. All right. So now we start to see smashing the center. And again, don't worry about the computer eval too much. It's such a dynamic situation, always changing. So it says plus 1.7, but see, I mean, Magnus 1. So it's complicated. Okay, what's going on here? So he's losing an exchange. Was there any way to avoid that? Well, first of all, let's see how bad this is. I mean, he has the bishop pair. it's a wide open board. He can easily eat up some pawns. So he can easily utilize the diagonals. H2 could become a focal point. Art of attack in chess, right? Easy focal point to look at, right? Imagine we have the. I mean, you could create some threats pretty quickly. And like I said, you could ram the H pawn. We'll call it the king rook pawn today. We could ram our king rook pawn. After, it could get dangerous. You have that. You have other ways to look at it too. But that's where, yeah, we'd have to create. Oh, someone said starting in 5 minutes. The next one, make it a water break in there. But I don't know. Even bishop b6 at some point. Control that square and c5 and just it could get dangerous for sure. So I see some kingside attacking prospects in the near future. I mean, f4 is a vital square. We like that f4. What do they call it? I'm heard Narodisky call it the f4 f5 knife, or the knife knight or something like that. Well, Kasparov talked about the strength of those squares, especially like e4 e5 scenarios where you can latch onto those squares and get near the king. We have focal points again. So the G2's, I mean, yeah, I think G2 could become a focal point as well. So let's see if he's able to actualize some sort of kingside attack. Interesting. Oh, but by the way, I just wanted to check really quickly. So is it unavoidable to lose the exchange? So he opts for F5. See, the computer hates it. Let's see why, though. I mean, he opts for F5. So he's kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's kind of tricky. It's easy to miss. Well, the thing is, if you can't take with the rook because the knight hangs laterally. I assume Magnus saw it, but what do we have? What's the time control? It was a 15-minute, I think. So, no, wait, hold on. What is it? Yeah, it's 15. Probably 15:10. So we have, yeah, I mean, if he wanted to, he can go d6, actually. But then, I don't know, what's he going to get hit with? It looks weakening. Looks pretty loose. So, yeah, the thing is, when he goes f5, so he's creating this kind of Dutch-like setup. And trying to fix this pawn in place, maybe, and just try to win the pawn later. A lot of pressure. If nothing else, you get the pawn for the exchange. Because right now we got 2, 4, we have 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 5. Oh, sorry, yeah, he's actually up a pawn for the exchange currently. He's got the bishop pair, so immediately there is some form of compensation. The good thing for white, though, is he does still have the bishop pair. He's still holding the pawn on e5, so it's holding off black's pieces. But when he takes en passant on f6, okay, that diagonal is opening, but then obviously the bishop takes it, decides to take the exchange. Now it's black's again. Black can take the diagonal again with the dark square control. So it's very dynamic. It's unclear. I suppose Magnus was fine going into it, but he certainly didn't have to. Okay, for example, the computer recommends this, h5, and I don't know. I don't think it's not so appetizing. The knight looks very awkward. Maybe he's going for f6 to unleash the knight later. I mean, that's a nice knight, though, on g4. I like his knight a lot. And, yeah, I mean, you could remove it with, like, knight h2, but no, then you take the e-pawn. So it's kind of tricky. It's difficult to remove for now, actually. And that pressure on the e-pawn could become insurmountable at some point. So let's see. But at any rate, he goes for this. He gives up an exchange. So here we are. Castles, yeah. Should be okay. I mean, there's really not much attack going on. You got 2 knights covering the king's side. The new one started. Okay, cool. Let's go to that. Let's just blitz through it real quick just to get a sense for what happened, a sense of what happened here. So he gets both bishops. He trades queens, interestingly. So again, we have 5. Okay, we have 5 against 4 still. Beautiful bishops. He picks up another pawn. He has to trade rooks, but still, I mean, it's very difficult to handle the bishop pair. As we can see, ultimately it yielded him a bishop versus knight with that, and he kept that extra pawn on the board. So right now we have 4 against 2, but he inevitably ends up winning the a pawn. And then how do we get our exchange back? Okay, well, because of this nasty pawn. So he's overloading it. Well, the thing is, if you don't take, then he's going to wrap around anyhow and kick the knight and stuff. So he probably gets to push anyway. You don't even have rook e6 now to cover this. So it looks like he's going to get the knight, rather the rook for the bishop. And then there we are. And then we got this scenario. And he slowly but surely is going to advance those pawns, trying, of course, to corral the knight, which he ended up sort of, doing in a long range, and just keeping it away from the action. Yeah, that was just bad. I think it was just ultimately, you can look it up more later, but he just moved the knight too far away. And yeah, then he, well, it seems like he's just going to hang out, but how does he ultimately win? Let's see the winning process. So he checks, I guess is he just losing the knight? Yeah, it's getting corralled. So that was not good the way it moved. Okay, here we go. So that lost for him. Could have held it. Okay, here we go. Just the beginning of the game. And make sure it looks right. Got everything in the right place. Yep. Cool. Okay. Interesting. So now we have Carlsen with white, and he's immediately just taking a big center. I love to ram that A pawn or H pawn right away. Especially now we see there's a focal point. There's an immediate potential focal point. I think what's the equivalent of like an F2 or F7? Right now it looks like it's G7 and slash G2. Well, Magnus is the first at it, so he takes his central control, which will allow him. It'll make it easier for him to attack on the wing, as we have seen AlphaZero do. The pretty much strongest computer, and then Stockfish started using the neural network and became pretty strong as well. But of course, it wiped it off the board. What was it? 100 wins and but out of 100, it was like what, 18 wins and the rest draws. Just wiped it off the board. Okay, so here we go. Takes the center, solidifies, push the wing pawn. Now, computer's saying, okay, stop him. It didn't stop him. Now, no matter what, I like this because either he stops you and you get a space advantage, like Carl-Khan type style, the bishop f5 line where you press, or if he doesn't, you could ram through. Either you break it up or you get that pawn. Just the last video I did, I had that annoying pawn and that ended up being pretty strong. I botched it later and we had a draw, but the pawn it could have led to a win. So it could be very strong. So far he's establishing pretty nice position. Now we'd have to think here, okay, do I bypass? I don't think so. Let me get rid of the computer eval. I don't think there's any need for that. You could do it in the future, but why would you open up that very strong bishop sniping from that cave on h7? We're not gonna help him do that. So I mean, it's hanging on there, but you can see he's got a squeeze, and now can he marshal his forces over to the king side? That would be great. Well, we'll call it the king side, even though it's the queen. Technically, the queen side, but look, in this case, it doesn't matter about A and B because we start. The king begins there. We're going to call it the king side, right? So D5 for the purposes. It's chess 960. I love it. Freestyle. I love the new name. I think that makes it much more accessible and interesting. It's what it is. Yeah, it sounded kind of esoteric. We'll fish around him. That's cool. We can call it whatever we want. But then we're doing hashtag FRChess. What is that? Freestyles. It makes sense. Okay, so what's going on here? I can see that, these squares again, right? So equivalent to the F4, F5 squares. So I'm looking at something like this. If we can fortify the pawn on E4, fortify our center, and we just kind of overwhelm with our knights, try to sink a knight into F4, ready to take back with another knight with probably a super strong attack. We got queen coming in, we got rook lifting, we've got bishop aiming here with potential. So I'm going to grab some water real quick. But yeah, so he's thinking a little bit here. We have Magnus at 12 minutes, Firouzja at almost 16 minutes. That's interesting. Firouzja just blasted out those moves, and apparently he's worse. I mean, what could he have? I don't know. What could he have done instead? It might be one of those scenarios where it just really favors white out of the opening based on this setup. It's interesting, though. So he didn't want to, he just took the center. He didn't need to open his G bishop immediately. His G bishop is going to support, his dark squared bishop will support his central pawn. The pawn will support on F3, will support his E4 pawn. I call it the house setup, like a step. If you go C3, it looks a little sketchy, but you can do that in bishop C2. I wouldn't do it if I didn't need to, though, because we already have the bishop guarding. We can do like maybe a queen move, like queen D2, castle queen side, or king side, we'll call it. But we will end up with the king. So you have to move the C rook, and we would end up in the normal queen side castle position where the king would actually move over one to the right on C1, and the rook would go to D1. Or we can swing all the way on the other side. If you move these pieces away, we can actually swing from B1 to G1, and this rook on C1 would go to F1. So it's pretty cool. Susan Polgar was talking about how she was discussing with Fischer those rules, so apparently she was part of that. Like, where should you end up when you castle? Well, they have no castling chess. I think this is much more interesting than that. You do get to castle in the normal way, because they probably figured, hey, should we make the king go to B1 and G1 instead? But they decided on standard. Okay, so what's going on? But yeah, in terms of what he could have done, I think he's just kind of playing it like hyper modern. He probably figures, hey, this will be like a Carl-Khan almost, going for, again, a familiar setup. But it makes a lot of sense. You strike back, but it's like a Carl-Khan, where the bishop is immediately, by default, outside of the pawn chain. Whereas in a Carl-Khan, you have to work for that. Now I would like to go queens, or we'll call it queenside to g8, and then punch back again, just like Carlsen French style. And if we're going to play c5, we'd rather have our king away. We could push all those queenside pawns. And again, like given that it's going to take a while to get, if he wants to get to g1 with Magnus's king, it would make a lot of sense to go hit him in the center / queenside where the king is more likely to be. And obviously, as we see, Magnus is committing himself to the king side. Now it could become like a queenside equivalent if we go to the right, then that would be the side where the kings are not. But it's going to take them both a little time to castle very long, as long as you can go, because you need to have rooks on both sides in chess 960, so you can castle like that. Pretty much the only requirements in terms of how you program the positions to get the 960 is the rooks are on both sides, bishops are on opposite colors. That's it. And then you get your 960 possible combinations of that, including the regular standard international chess version. Okay, interesting. So Magnus is certainly committed to just, like I said, there's just no need to commit to e5. He's committed with c4, just blast it, but he is not committed by fixing pawns. So I guess he's staying flexible. But I mean, he's committed in terms of going for like a 3-pawn central attack, which would be equivalent to an Austrian attack anyway, on the other side. So anyway, I'll get away from the standard openings. But again, this is a reference point. We just have to know, can we have a reference point? Like, queen's gambit, king's gambit, but obviously knowing the novel circumstances. So Magnus obviously has to be aware of the pressure, for example, on d4 and e4. c4, no problem. We have plenty of protection. We have 2 protectors and only 1 attacker. No one else coming in the near future to attack c4. It's interesting. So his king is just going to hang out on b1 for now, and you can lift the rooks. But certainly if he wants to, just lift the bishop, tuck it on f2, and we can castle. And I call that the Karpov style bishop, because I've seen Karpov do that so many times. He'd go like bishop e3, maybe in a same-ish variation of a king's, it would be the white side of the king's Indian. Then he would castle, and the bishop would tuck on f2. So he might do his Karpov style. Let's see if he does that. I'm curious. Castle's there. I think he could be safe on either side, but I do feel like the king might be safer on g1. Just get it away. And again, just like I was talking about with black, well, where did the queen come from? She might be moving out of the way. Now, obviously, she can't. That's the problem with a space squeeze. You got a space advantage for white, so she can't just go to d6. It looks like there's just purely a fork with e5 without too many consequences. So she would like to probably move. Maybe you have to go like c6 if Magnus will allow it, but then you start seeing that bishop sneaking into the diagonal. You can't even go to c7. But if you have time, you probably go castle kingside, or queen side. We'll call it castle long. Castle is too confusing, right? Castle long, and then that way Magnus's efforts on the left, let's say, won't be as dangerous. But that would be like your typical like a queenside attack, because if we're both on g1 and g8, that's, again, it's the side where the kings are not. Now, obviously, you can still launch a vicious attack there and have plenty of play, especially if he does go c6. Everything's fixed in place, and I could see a nice rook lift happen. Oh, you can't quite go there yet, but one of the rooks is going to get up there. Now, you can also do something like, b4, and once you're castled, just stick a rook on b1 and blast. Get a bayonet attack kind of thing going on the hook pawn. So here we are. We just have this position. Magnus has been thinking a bit. He thought a while on what, just especially knight f2. He spent some time. Like I said, maybe he did that same thing. I mean, he sees the c5 square in sight. Why not? You're actually already guarding e4, so you could immediately go. Probably start with b3. Keep your eyes on e4 for as long as you can. But then when you're ready, I don't see any immediate additional pressure. When we have a big center, as Stillman says, it's your responsibility to defend it. So it is Magnus's responsibility to hold on, especially the e4 pawn, which has got some heat against it. But again, you just have to know, what are my opponent's resources? Okay, so he has 2 on it. We have 4 defenders. So we move 1 knight away, we have 3, so we're fine. As long as we have as many defenders as attackers. But, it'll get a little loose unless we really make sure we'd rather have more defenders than attackers, or be sure that you can't really get to it. Now we have queen c6 options we have to look out for. But then you say, oh, is that an issue? Not really, because then c4 hits pretty hard. It's very uncomfortable. And Firouzja probably doesn't want to have to give up the d pawn and trade. It gives away a lot of center. Then Magnus will really be dominating that center. Interestingly, Firouzja was the one dominating the center last time, but it was a loose center, with e5 being attackable. So far, Magnus's center has not become trashed by Firouzja's counter strikes. Let's see, and he doesn't. Yeah, I'm not seeing any pawn moves here to hit at it. So anyway, we want to make sure e4 is fortified, and that's where C is putting more pressure, and he's provoking the push, which we're probably not going to do. So there's no more central pawn pushes. Okay, we have a few more moves only. Bishop out naturally, tempo. Again, tempting this c6, because we're going to see that bishop carving into dark square. I think it's bishop d6, but no, he'd get forked. You can also, yeah, you'll get ultimate, just huge amount of dark square control, just vicious on the diagonal. So it's so again, even if he gets to g8, I'm still seeing a lot of attacking chances. Again, we could both go to the right long. We can have a lot of pressure here. But again, how do you get there? You can't with black. Firouzja's tied up. So you're really seeing the effect of the space advantage. Magnus has total freedom of movement. Firouzja not so much. Again, c6. Because what I was saying is that c6 might allow queen c7. Don't want to take, because then you run into bishop takes c6 probably. And just, destroy the left side of the board. So, but maybe. But what I'm getting at is here, bishop's ready. I think that's why he might want bishop f2. He didn't actually do it. We'll get a couple moves in. We're only 2 moves farther. But I would like to get to g3. We'll see if Magnus does that as well. Again, he's probably looking at c5, fighting for dark squares, making him worry about the white squares. But that's not as much of an issue for Firouzja because he has 3 guards. We have 2 attackers. So he knows he can clamp on a d5. That's Firouzja's strength. Magnus is just really going for dark squares that he can push if he feels like it. But I think he'd rather, my guess is he'd rather utilize those for pieces, of course. Why not? The whole point of space is ultimate, unless you use the pawns to squeeze, but you're trying to squeeze their, restrict their pieces and maximize your forces, unless ultimately you can do like a sack. And I remember Izori, Zviad Izori, he beat me twice. I have a tough time against him. So I played him in the Marshall Chess Club, and I remember that. So he had a space advantage, I was just holding it down. But then he did a piece sack, and the pawns would try to get space steamrolled. So he had 2 pawns for the piece, and ultimately, my king had to run to the other side, and he chased him. He turned it into a nice king hunt. But anyway, that's the other thing you do with space, right, to roll your pawns. But a lot of times it's just restriction of their pieces, mobilization of your pieces. So the default, I think, would be not to lock it down, but to be able to play on the files and have the knight sink in to e5 and c5. So let's see how Magnus, now let's see whether this, my hypothesis ends up, if he ends up carrying out what I'm thinking here. So g3 says, okay, you want to comment? Oh, so he is not going for bishop f2. Now, he probably thought about it. He's like, okay, well, I can't quite get there. And if you go g4 to kick it, okay, knight comes in. If you want to go bishop g3, boom, he goes g5. You have a hole on on f4. So the moment you go g4, h4, h3, f3, f4, those all become weak because the g pawn has lost its ability to guard. So by definition, if a pawn can't guard something, it's a weak square / weak pawn. If a pawn resides on the weak square, so f3 becomes problem 2. But the knight would sink in. You're on bishop f2, for example, you attack it. Yeah, he can easily go g5. Well, first of all, you have to deal with the queen. But just, hypothetically, you move the queen, you'd have to, try to kick it out, but he'll go g5. So that's why he probably just goes g3. He's like, nope, I'm not giving you the weakness. I'm trying to make your knight look silly. Plus, I can go, oh, yeah, he has a trap. e5 now, in this case, to purely restrict the knight. And then threatening f4 looks like just picks up a clean knight because you can't guard that further. So it looks like e5 is pretty much a threat right now. So he does go c6, interestingly. Well, that makes sense because, like I said, bishop f2 to g3 or something like that, some bishop diagonal pressure would pretty much preclude the whole c6 idea. Because, look at Firouzja's dark squared weaknesses by sticking his pawns on light squares, Slav style. In the Slav, you're going to be weak on dark squares and you hope you can hold them. But Magnus can't reach it, although he can try to make that knight embarrass the knight. Let's see if you can. That knight, I think he has to go back. Let's see. There you go. Yeah, he goes back. So now we have the same time. Now we're both in the 9-minute range. Okay, we get some water real quick. Let's see if it's still going. Looking, all right. Looking like everything's in the right. I always move it around a little bit, but looks like we're in the right place. Okay, cool. I'll be right there. you go. So he chose, he opted not to lock it, of course. I mean, it would just be sort of, I think, sort of counterproductive. I mean, yes, it's space, right? We don't just knee-jerk push our pawns. Because it would assist this bishop. It would facilitate the bishop's activity. Just why would you open it up for him if you don't need to? And again, I mean, just look at, we can see the king side. It's just pretty weak over here. Now, like I said, I do think if I were playing as Firouzja, I would move the queen and just castle. Stick that king over there. It'll be very similar to, it would really be a Carlsen type position. It really would be. Because the bishop, there's many lines, g4, for example, tucks back. Now, he could do that anyway. But I think what we might get is an interesting scenario where Magnus is obviously trying to put pressure on the center so he doesn't have time to castle. But if so, I mean, obviously black has tons of protection around the king. So it's not like a default kingside attack for white. Even if e5 were to happen to try to put pressure, it's just not. He didn't do that. He took, right? He went here on the next move. But yeah, you can castle kings. You can go to g1 with white and simply just play over here. So if we both castle, I'm really liking the look of rook b1, b4, b5 stuff. But in the meantime, take, knight e5, beautiful. Yeah, he's not relenting. No time for him to do what he wants. Now, obviously, he's offering some trades. I don't think we're going to take back with the queen. I think in this case, he would take with the pawn. Gives him more space. But keep in mind, now we'd really have some pressure on d5. And I mean, we'll have to trade off the bishops. But look, I mean, we're going to start to see weaknesses on light squares too. So when you take back, this often happens in like when you're playing these scenarios where you all have pawns on like Queen's Gambit scenarios, like a Tarrasch, for example. If you get rid of that knight on f6, that d5 pawn can fall quickly. That's where we often have that rook opposing the queen through the x-ray. So you can start to see problematic situations. Now he went back, so obviously, I'm sure the computer eval's liking white a lot here. It says +2. And like I mentioned, if we trade this guy off on h7, we're starting to see some light square pressure. And black's position is not good. It's riddled with weak points. I mean, even though you can play g6, and then the knight's not coming to cover f5, but still, just that entire diagonal. Bishop's not there anymore, but you can't, cut in with the bishop, but you can still look at all those squares. I mean, there's so many rich possibilities for white here. He takes back. So we have a neutralized center. Blocks, I don't like the bishop being blocked. We'll try to find some life for him. But interestingly, so this looks like it could head towards kind of a very late middle game or end game. It looks like we're going to have some trades, which is what Firouzja is hoping for. But I mean, he can just go, let's say he goes into an end. It's like, for example, let's say you enter a rook and pawn endgame, and it looks equal, but then, or even you sack a pawn and get the rook in, right? You have that development advantage. You improve your piece first, right? So this could be a scenario where he just goes into an endgame. His pieces are better placed. He's got the crippling e5 pawn, which could help him in an endgame, as long as it doesn't become a target somehow. There you go again, right? There's that knight coming in. He might even consider letting him take and then having the, steamrolling the three pawns, and, bishop can plant somewhere in the middle. I doubt it yet. I doubt he'd do it yet. It's possible. It really is. But, what's the rook's future? For instance, if he were to do this, you can see the rook doing some lifts, having more mobility, because he can't go to c4, he can't go to b4 right now. I mean, I briefly looked at this move, king a2, to bring the rook to c1 eventually. The queen would obviously try to check, but I don't know. I might try to get there. It doesn't look really feasible. But look at this knight. I mean, the knight looking at, having the knight go back to h8. And if you play f6, I mean, then you're taking away more squares from black's pieces, and you're just like weakening e6. So it's just black's position is riddled with weaknesses. And it's interesting that Carlsen said the only person he'd want to play in the championship would be Firouzja. Otherwise, he said, I'm not going to defend it. So here you go, epic match between the two. So kind of really hot, like chess, just rapid games, which are more and more popular. Chess 960 or Freestyle, which is more and more popular, against two of some of the strongest, some of the best players in the world, fighting to become the GOAT. And I just love that they're considering 960 as the GOAT, because that is really determinant of strength, chess 960. Because you can't just play boring stuff and just say, oh, I'm going to draw a bunch of games, Karpov or Style. And we saw Ding did not do well when he didn't have the crutch of opening theory. I mean, maybe it's just a bad week for him, but he did poorly. From what I saw, it looked like he did really poorly. And I think he's lost to Magnus on Chess Base India. I think he's lost him like 5 times. So it's not looking good for him. Okay, let me just double check something. Be right there. But yeah, so he's trading a bit. But I'm seeing a little bit of a conundrum for Magnus. So you can see, even though his position's very nice, you can see Black is trying to liberate the knights. And White needs to liberate the rook. So I think that's the problem. Like I said, I'm trying to find a way. I'm sure Magnus is puzzling over this. What's the best way? Because you could see if you go to A2, King A2 is like, what do I do about possibly Queen E8? Keep in mind, though, that this bishop's loose. Is this not possible to... Wait, is that not a possibility to take on F7 with the loose... What was the last move? No, he could have done it then if it were possible. No, it's not possible, obviously, because... Oh, it's not. No, that's the answer. No, it's not, because there's a queen check. You can't do that. Yeah, simply queen check. Pick up the knight. So we can't do that. Only way you could try is if you stop pushing your g-pawn. But obviously you could do... Oh, there he goes. So he's inviting queen e8. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. It's not like it's... As long as he doesn't walk into it to lose his knight, which obviously he won't. He's aware of all this. So the problem, though, is you don't have time for rook c1 if he goes queen e8. I mean, obviously you have to be looking at queen e8. It's just an obvious looking move, right? Rook c1, queen e8. Now oh no, but it's Black's move, right? You don't have time, because again he'd come in and actually he would win the knight. So yeah, this is problematic. So the question is, how do you react to queen e8? There it is on the board. It's just an obvious move, and he's like, well, maybe you don't actually get anything out of this. What I was thinking was that the queen can go to to cover the knight. It's a very nice move, though, because now he can even think about king a7 if Firouzja might get his. So maybe if Firouzja begins to untangle himself. Obviously, he's super tangled up right now. What I don't like for Magnus, again, was the rook and bishop, because he's got his knights coming out. He's got his queen coming out. So knights are pretty much superior. But now Black's knight suddenly starts to show its strength on g5. And then on h8, okay, hoping to come in. If he can get those guys in the game, and he can get his rook out, and he can stay solid, I mean, you can argue for Black's for a slight Black advantage potentially in the future due to the fact that he might have a better bishop, looking at these 2 pawns which are fixed on dark squares, which is not great for this bishop. The bishop is stuck. You'd have to liberate that bishop again, try to do something with it. So yeah, he does take the file first. Wait, what's going on? So he has a tactic, huh? Well, obviously he is, quote, hanging the knight, which I didn't even look at. You have to look, because of course I was looking at, okay, well, we don't like the queen check, but he's come up with something, I suppose, creative. What is he doing? Okay, what's going to happen next? He has a check with the knight. Oh, that's the point. So he would actually have that. So he's basically saying, I'm going to trade the bishop for the knight, it seems. So if the queen checks, king here, retreats to b1, queen takes knight, knight checks on d7, forcing king a7. Unfortunately, that bishop is just miserable. It can't do anything dangerous. Otherwise, white would be winning, tactically. But yeah, so the queen takes the knight. We take the bishop. I don't know. That looks pretty good, actually. I mean, but we're trading off a knight, which should be good. Still, the bishop is becoming one of Black's best pieces. The knight does have a future wrapping over to e6 and attacking the d-pawn. This knight, I guess it might challenge. No, this knight on h8 is the bane of his existence, I think. Everything else, I mean, again, if you can achieve king a7 comfortably, the rook, I mean, you got to do that. You've got to play rook c8, because there's nowhere else good for the rook to go except for maybe e8. There are 2 open files to you. A very tricky situation. But like I said, even though it wasn't looking that great for Black, I think Firouzja is now beginning to liberate his position a little bit. Oh, interesting. So he's kicking that, but a little cramped again. He's very cramped. But the fact that, again, he's freed his position in the center, it gives him a little bit more. I don't like the bishop. Possibly, let's see the eval now. It's possibly not as good as it was. Nope, still says he's +3. Oh, that's weird. I would not see some of these moves. I almost wouldn't even think about. Well, yeah, once you start looking for tactics. But of course, at first, I wouldn't think about allowing the queen check. we're thinking about ways to support the knight and then go back safely. I also wouldn't really want to play a forward position. Again, I might think about it a little bit, but like I would look at it and be repulsed because I'm like, why do I want to go allow 94? There must be a good reason, right? But I would certainly, my inclination would be to play h4 if anything. Oh, interesting. Now it's looking at retreating. What is going on? Very strange. But yeah, see, the computer finds things like I wouldn't look. Again, I'm just honest. Like, who would look at King B1 except for maybe a computer or a very, very strong grandmaster? Why are you going to do this and hang this? Well, we got to think about it. Okay, there's a check. I mean, all of it needs to be considered. Let's say here. Okay, let's say we were to check and then the king would have to go to a7. I don't know. I'm not convinced that this would be great. Have like rook invasion. We can't use our bishop though unless you take back this way with the e pawn, the d pawn to e5 rather. Okay, one sec. Be right there again. I mean, it's just if I take off the computer, we're looking at moves like King B1. Just trying to figure like what the hell is going on with King B1. What on earth is going on? This is just crazy that you can consider. Again, it would be my inclination to one, hang the knight, or to two on B3, or to two, hang the knight on E5. So the computer wants to hang both knights, either one. But again, the thing is the king is, when you see loose pieces and exposed king, the thing is the only loose piece for black is pretty much, in some lines, the E7 bishop, especially if the queen moves. But if I view it loose if it's attacked once and defended once, which is basically mathematically the same as being attacked no time, so defended no time, which means it's loose, it's out there, not hanging yet, but loose to be subject to tactical blows. The knight on h8 could become loose. Knight on g5 should be fine. I mean, but it could be attacked. Again, I don't know about that. I don't understand it. I mean, it's interesting to see the computer move and try to parse that and figure it out ourselves. Try to look at that. I mean, knight f4. Why would you even think about knight e4? I'm very baffled. I'm really baffled by that. As to why I mean, positionally, obviously, it looks fantastic. And see, Magnus opted for the same thing I was thinking about. Not to boast. I'm like, oh, I saw the same thing as Magnus. Yeah. No, it's just obvious. Why? It's obvious to a human. What is going on? I'm a little dumbfounded, honestly. Oh, but okay, that's actually sensible because the knight hangs. He figures, hey, you move a knight, I take the bishop. And then but again, like, why would you want to take the bishop though? Because the bishop's bad. I'm very confused. But our curiosity should lead us to try to delve into this and get to the truth of the matter. That's what we're doing in chess. We need to get to the truth, and it can lead to some. It feels good if you arrive at the truth. So it's like, hey, if anything, I'm fine. If I don't find the truth in the world, I'm finding the truth over the chessboard because it's very clear. You're in the laboratory in 64 squares. You run some experiments, and maybe you can confirm with the computer if you want. But if it works out, it works out. If you get a checkmate, that's some truth right there. That's the big ultimate truth. But there's also truth in terms of, hey, that's the best move. It leads to what we can say if it's fuzzy in terms of, it leads to what we would think. Great, f4 is not good. It leads to knight e4. There's some truth in that. Apparently, maybe not. According to the computer, that's debatable. But if it leads to checkmate and your opponent has made the best moves, especially if it's hard, that's different. That's like, I guess it would be sort of like hard sciences versus social sciences. Sometimes the hard sciences you don't know for sure, but they're sometimes a lot clearer than social science. Anyway, we're trying to get to the truth of the matter, and here what I'm getting at is as one of my opponents said to me, nebulous. I like how you say it's a nebulous situation, very nebulous. So what on earth is going on? Let's see. Knight h3. So everything's like getting loose right now. Very loose situation. So meaning super tactical. We have potentially exposed kings, both subjected to potential checks, right? Definitely checks. I mean, you could see checks with the knight. I don't know about a rook check, but you never know. If he goes to a7, if you can blow open the diagonal, like I said, there are scenarios where you might sack the knight, open up the diagonal that way. And who knows? I mean, maybe then you can push and you might see a queen check. So just hypothetical scenarios. So again, trying to get to the truth just through in a fuzzy way. But again, I'm kind of baffled because you would think the knight would want to wrap back to the center, in order to. Well, but again, the problem is he's played f6. He'd want to do it. Maybe it would be more reliable with f7 pawn, tuck back. Then you get weird stuff like knight g6 doesn't work because you take, and then e6 falls. So you could see this in this kind of overloading factor in his opponents in Firouzja's position. And Magnus, again, I'd be pretty happy to let him take. But I think what's going on as well is that he's probably happy himself to lure the rook away from the c file. So it might alleviate Firouzja's plight a little bit. Very, very complicated scenario, though. So we have a lot of loose pieces, a lot of weaknesses. I think that Magnus probably has the better of it in terms of weaknesses. And obviously, I mean, look, it's just development. He's got one. Mathematically, he's just superior. 1, 2, 3, 4 out. Not really the bishop. Firouzja, 1, kind of. 1, 2, kind of the queen. Almost like 2.5, maybe. No and no. Finally, though, but look, Magnus apparently he's attempting tactically to solve the problem of the rook. Now they solve the problem, I mean, everything's as good as it can be. And again, I'd be pretty happy if he were to take the bishop and get rid of it. I'll come back to the c area. Again, e-file could become certainly relevant once things move out of the way. It is an open file. So really, what's the crux of the position? I would say the immediate kind of ephemeral aspect of the loose pieces, that's fleeting, right? Then you have the more long-term stuff in terms of pawn structure and the fact that we end the cramping effect in black's position and the open files, a question of who is able to utilize the files and whether black can actually finish his development. Although I think if he's able to trade off the knight, I'm just trying to think of how things might clarify here. I think would it be a little clarified if we trade off the knight for the bishop, Black gets the rook out, gets the knight out. So obviously that's what Firouzja wants. He either wants to make something tactical happen, like get him with the queen. But here's the problem: if anything tactical, any tactical blows should favor Magnus. Because okay, let's say we trade pieces. Queen gets to b3. She's not doing anything solo on b3. She's just not. And the knight's trying to do its thing over there. But you see, once we have a little bit of a liquidation, like I said, pieces can liquidate, but again, Magnus might just win that endgame. And the other one was arguably drawn, but a difficult draw. This one could just be really problematic. And keep in mind, not only does this pawn on a5 have a cramping effect going into the endgame, like I said, it has the middle game prospects. I would love to open the bishop, and that's the main. I think that's really Magnus's main problem is this ephemeral situation with the loose knight. It's temporary dynamics again, which may in many cases favor him. We also have, but really those knight checks could become very dangerous too. Knight check. Oh yeah, sure. That might be very possible actually if the queen moves, because you force him to open himself up and you come in. The rook might come in or do a rook. Oh, check that out too. If we have a rook lifted, we support b3 next. We get So anyway, these are hypotheticals, but you can see these hypotheticals will become lines. Very likely can become real lines. Real weaknesses that will be exploited through tactical lines in many cases. You'll at least see them embedded in. So I was writing about this yesterday in terms of calculation and tactics. So just because you calculate a long line doesn't mean there have to be tactics. But in some of those branches in your calculation tree, there will be tactics that branch off that are embedded in those lines. So again, it's part of the truth. Getting to the truth, it's part of the truth of the position. It doesn't mean doesn't have to be revealed, but it's there, which it can be revealed if certain things are to happen. But it is kind of in the code of the position. It's encoded. Is it going to be? Yeah. Is it going to be kind of what's the word? Yeah. Is it going to be basically? Is it going to become a salient factor or not? Is it actually going to manifest itself in the game? That's another matter. But when you're calculating, you have to see those things. We look at hypotheticals, we look at possibilities, we look at loose pieces, exposed kings, weaknesses, and all this stuff. It all kind of, and again, this is the roughness, the kind of rougher, cloudy aspect of your evaluation. But that does that leads to concrete lines. And again, then we put it all together, and we might get to the truth of the matter. And then we'll see the truth of the matter in terms of what they actually do and whether it actually works or not. And these guys, some of the best players in the world, but they're confined by time. They have time constraints, and they also have just human minds dealing with extreme complication. Now, for me, again, I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, hopefully, and blabbering on, and hopefully getting somewhere. at least a little closer to the truth of the matter. And we only have a few more moves that have been played. See, but Firouzja, so we almost have some sort of stasis, but he keeps hanging his knight, probably because he sees that his bishop will be activated, and therefore he avoids the trade, even though it's a quote bad bishop. Keep in mind that's not permanent. It is worse, we could say, theoretically, than Black's bishop, because Black's bishop has tons of scope. And don't forget, in an endgame, that bishop can try to pick off the a pawn. At the very least, it would like tie the knight or the king to it, for example. Something would be tied to it. So that is a liability in some cases. Also, the b7 pawn is fixed. Now, we don't have a light square bishop to attack it, but we do have like maybe a knight coming in. Or maybe a blasted open and do stuff on the b file, or obviously invade on the 7th somehow. So these two pawns, maybe, hey, wouldn't that be interesting if Magnus achieves h5? Now we have 2 cramped pawns. So really, it's double-edged. Super double-edged situation, but I think Magnus might get the better out of this. Again, it's dependent on these tactics. But the objective factors of the main objective factor of having more pieces mobilized, in general, that really it tends to lean in White's favor. The weight of that, it should favor him, generally speaking. But then we have to see, when the rubber meets the road, how it actually. Again, how it manifests itself in the game. But anyhow, okay, so we have knight h3. Then he there you go. See, excellent. So now he's supporting the knight. But again, he just keeps hanging his own knight. But in this case, very hard tactics. You can look at it if you want to try and figure out what would happen. Very hard tactics now. Game over if he takes. Check. And then unleashing. Oh, no, my bad. I'm sorry. Because the knight takes. It's not there after here. But it's the kind of thing where maybe Magnus just keeps, like he did, he keeps hanging the knight because it's like, well, I can wait a move. My position's so strong that if you take, maybe he grabs this first, that's the thing. But if you do take, there's so much going on. Wow. Anyway, but then for instance, he wouldn't have the unleashing with check anymore. But there are other things too. I'm looking at, there's so much going on. There's also, you can get perpetual if you really want. I don't think he wants, obviously Magnus is fighting for a win to just finish this thing off. I guess if he wins this game, he should finish it. If he loses, then we have more tie breaks, looks like. But yeah, this is really critical to figure out what's going on. So then he moves away. Let's go back a second though. Make sure we understand this fully. I think that's it. But no, the only question is, okay, look, if you take, simply, he could take with check. There might be more, but at least you're not losing any material. Although that's kind of interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, this is, like I said, some scenario. I do think that he has a much better end game, and you take back with check, and that is very bad. No, this is huge advantage because the rook is stuck again, and the knight's stuck, and White's obviously winning +7. The computer agrees. But let's take a quick look at the computer eval here because it's just so complicated. It's saying that White's at winning +3.5. So f6 best move, h4. It wanted king b1, but whatever. h4 seems okay, not as good. Knight h3. He should have taken the knight. So knight h3, correct. And then he resolves the matter of the b3 knight with queen c2, but he does not. Well, he clearly tactically is resolving the matter of the hanging knight on e5. So question is, wow. You say nice e5. There we go, storming it. But I really like this move because he just gets away from the knight. And there's that awkward knight. He can easily win the knight in the future. I don't see. Yeah, he has no future on h3. So, anyhow, again, we have to ask ourselves what it takes. Maybe he just. No. Wait. Here we are. Again, no. If he were to take now, what is going on? Is the check? Now what now? Do we? Like, I was thinking of maybe moving the bishop and then taking anyhow. I'm curious, does that work? That's what I was thinking of. Oh, no, wait. Okay, there's a check. What's going to happen now? Oh, because then the queen hits the bishop, so you would lose, game over. Oh, wow. So the tactic doesn't work because of that sneaky check, takes, and hits the bishop laterally. Wow. There might be something weird. Like, is there something crazy like rook c3, but then he has a check. And then it says it's a draw. Then he has to take what does he do? He has to take a draw, yeah. Perpetual. Oh, wait. I don't know. We'll look at it. We don't need to look at that right now, but I want to look at the main line. So it says queen b6 check, forcing the king back again, but where is the justification? Check again. Okay, that's not what we want then. What do we have? Wait, what? Show me something here. Is it rook c7? Yeah, it's rook c7, game over. Where's the defense? Queen? Oh, that's weird. He has that move. Let's come on in more. Now we're actually threatening some vicious stuff. We'll just take his mate. Wow, see, it's kind of slow, but again, wait. So I think it's a little slower, but now by the time you take this guy, wait, what? I was thinking of this move, taking with the pawn. Uh-oh. Perpetual again. No, we did not want that, because I was thinking of pushing the pawn and breaking through. So it wants the rook move. So like sort of slower. Giving up this guy, what's the tactic here? Check, and then we have then this acts as a pawn, creating a back rank mate. Beautiful. Okay, then we have our elementary tactic there. Wow. So it's kind of slow. You know, you have to wait a little bit, offer a piece, then have sort of a slower. It's going to take you a couple moves to prove it without even a forcing move yet. Just have to build it for a couple moves. So interestingly, now it makes more sense. The knight's away. Then he plays f4. At which point, obviously, after which the knight does not have the ability to go to f4 because he's out of the game. But again, he still hangs this, but that does not look good because we take with check now. And we have a mate in 11. Okay, what is going on? What's the next one? Well, we don't really want to take, do we? I don't think we take. Again, we sort of play a little slowly. We just grab just latch on. We're like, I'm just a piece down. I'm going to play and just keep attacking you. Now this is hanging, though. No, you can't. You're going to get the piece back easily because you can't move its mate. So you can easily get it back whenever you want. Okay, the queen check, what does that actually do? Yes, she has to go back. Okay, and then you can take if you feel like it. You can't even take back because the mate. Amazing. Yeah, it's just totally winning it. Oh, it says it's mate in 7. It's just totally winning it. Boom. Queen takes. Oops. If the queen takes, what do we have now? Oh, wow, amazing. Because we have the simple discovery and mate. Where the rook upon takes on c8. So everything is working for him, as I said, because you have such mobility, and the weakness is once you unleash the bishop, he's dead, right? The king is dead. Checkmate. Okay. So what do we have now? Bishop e3, the king a7, f4, rook d8, knight c5. I love how he just keeps hanging his knight. But again, keep in mind, it's kind of more, well, first of all, even if he didn't get a piece back, it's like, he has such a big attack. But secondly, if he really wants to, he can give away the piece just like for positional means, like even if he doesn't have a mate, and just win the knight back in the future. Like even if, in the future, just rook over and take it in an end game. You could even do that. I would rather not, and then have to come back. I'd rather not even need to take it. I'd rather get a checkmate, big concession, or some big concession on where the king is, on the king side now. Okay, uh-oh, then another uh-oh. Well, now we're down to what? Oh, we're down to seconds. Okay, let's see how strong this move is. Rook hangs, rook moves, knight takes. Okay, we obviously don't have to go there, but let's say the rook goes somewhere else. What are we doing here? Oh, that's nasty. Rook has to go away again. Takes, if you want to take this one. This is crazy. Check. And then if the king goes back, it looks like there's a mate coming. Oh, you take the knight and then take this guy. And then take this one, and then you can mate them. That's nasty. Vicious. Okay. So, yeah, 96 will be very strong. But he makes... wow, see, he's comfortable with his endgame. Interesting. So what if he had gone into the endgame? Well, he was obviously evaluating this looks good for him. And again, let's say the capture. Actually, you'd actually be up a piece because you'd win the bishop back. Okay, why not? Let's see. You could do that. Yeah, I just want to take back. And if he wants to go after this one, you could probably just go here. Yeah, game over. But also this knight will fall, so you'll be up a piece ultimately, get a piece back, and then you get the knight if you feel like it, if you don't have anything better, which you probably do. And yeah, that's done. So yeah, it's so they should get rid of this guy then before it becomes too dangerous. Let's say trade. Interestingly, this could become, no, I think we have b4 later. Okay, it's like a little hitting this pawn. And he takes the piece. Okay, again, I think it's ultimately just you have to come back, and it just seems so lame just to come back around. Do we even need to take the knight yet? I think we're going to work with our assets over here. Okay, fine. We'll take another pawn. Yeah, we probably get the knight back, but even if not, like, okay, let's say you make a human move and take the pawn. We come back again. That's annoying. And then you might get out of there. Wow. So you have to be careful, but I mean, it's two connected past pawns, and black might have some counter sack for one of the pawns and hold or something. Yeah, but it got complicated. So technically, he should have gone 96. He had like a few seconds on the clock. Oh, and he won. Here, let's see the finish. He just won. Catch up a few moves. He did do the move after the queen. But like I said, I mean, I was pretty sure the endgame looked good for him. Because look, again, we have our advantage in development. That's it. 4 out versus basically 2 out. Not doing much either. We have a file. He's done on h3. He's not done, but completely worthless on h8. More of just a target in those lines, as we saw, where he gets taken and gets mated. But here we are in the end game, entering the end game. And then now he's just like, fine, let's just make this trade. And I'm up, what, 3, 4, 5? Well, basically, it feels like up a pawn, at least, because these pawns are such trash pawns. But more importantly, forget about the pawns. Well, it's where the pawn is. Like, we could be missing 1 or 2 pawns over here, but we have these powerful pawns, supported, protected, passed pawn, beautifully placed knight. I mean, this is going to fall. You're not going to be able to hold. He's going to pick off the pawns like ripe apples. Beautiful. Pawn storm coming. He could even, if he wanted to, he can go back and take this. But I suppose he feels like he doesn't need it. He has a fork, and then he resigned because everything collapses. So, for instance, let's say the knight comes out. We just eat pawns. Doesn't matter which one you take. I suppose he figures he'll get this while because he's going to get both. Game. And then he just trades or something and just liquidates. And then if you take with the rook, game over, in the rook in the knight versus bishop endgame, too many pawns, so you can't trade the rooks. Then he gives it. So we have 2, 4, 5 versus 3, and again we have the bishop coming back to haunt his knight again. So he's like, I'm done. So I guess Magnus won the quarterfinals, huh? Wow, nice, really nice. That was more decisive. Now, yeah, there was technically a draw. They both, first Magnus gave him an option to draw, and then Firouzja naturally missed it because they were in time pressure. This is an incredibly difficult game to understand. So hopefully through the analysis of the game, we've arrived at some semblance of understanding. So complicated. But like I said, I didn't like this idea. Why would the computer, what was it? It was looking at it like here. Yeah, it's very complicated. Okay, what's going on with the capture here? Okay, still, it looks a little murky. What's the idea? We're not really, are we getting in even? I mean, there's like, I don't even know what we're going to do. It looks murky to me. What is this? I think this is a computer line. I mean, it's just like a natural, it's just a pure piece sack for, you can't exactly see the direct implications in terms of lines, but it's just a position, kind of a positional sack. I don't think there's some. Oh, I think there's something concrete in bishop, maybe, but even that's a little murky. You have like stuff, coming to 7th rank, but if you check, what would be beautiful is if you had a check here, some queen diagonal stuff. It's kind of hard to. I mean, you have queen retreats. It'll take you a few moves, but it's the kind of thing where you have a few moves. Because it's just a bind, It's really just that it's a bind. It's just positional. There's tactical stuff on the king side, but it's just positional too. I mean, protected, pass pawn, 4 against 2, and now the bad bishop gets unleashed. So yeah, that's about it. All right. Anyone have any questions about it? This is my favorite. Oh, thanks, Jordan. Well, we're student/friend too, so I appreciate it, Jordan. Very generous of you to say that. But yeah, I'm a quote small streamer, so it's trying to keep up with it and actually build it a little bit. So hopefully you gain something from it. I know it got in the woods, but look, I mean, it's a very complex position. We're trying to get to the truth of it. But like I said, I think I like what he did. Obviously, he's Magnus, but in terms of his flexibility, I think I like what he did also in terms of instructive value. So he didn't really make some of those weird computer moves that it was looking at. He made really logical moves, and interestingly, it does like this move, looking at g3 in the near future. So not actually bishop g3, but there might be lines where you can play bishop g3 check, because for instance, it's just a blunder to block, is it not? Wait, am I missing something? Yeah, we can take and play e5, can we not? What is this? I mean, it's wait, what? You could maybe one what? Wait, what is this? Is it that strong? Oh, duh. Wait. Oh, I just didn't look at this move. Oh, it is. So there you go. That's intuitively you don't want to play e5, and actually tactically, and therefore there's another argument for g3. But even so, you'd have this move to take with check, even if you cover f4. Interesting. Yeah, but I love chess 960 / Fisher Random / Freestyle / 9LX. But yeah, I either like Fisher Random or I'm going with Freestyle. I love that. But I mean, this just doesn't feel like the right move. I mean, you just gotta get for sure, because this really led to him being tied. You just can't make a move like that if you can avoid it, all else being equal. So, for instance, I mean, but Magnus, he knows Magnus has him in a bind. Let's just look at a sample line. Again, the theme of trying to get the truth of the position, which is very, again, I'm going to use the word nebulous. As an expert, I was probably like an A class, played an expert, and I remember analyzing, like, it was a very nebulous situation, very nebulous. That's cloudy. I will use that word, why not? Or is it a pretentious word? Okay, yeah, so I think that was problematic. And then he just comes in, it's just intuitive. I mean, especially for a rapid game, he just made all the right decisions. And he found these really amazing tactics. And really, Magnus, I mean, I'm sure his centipon loss was pretty low. Well, you look at Fischer games, his might be a little higher than others, as in some is less accurate, because he went for murkier situations, just like this, highly murky situation. So it might still be something, it's not going to be like 10 centipon loss, you never know. But, I mean, he played pretty accurately, actually. But given the murkiness and the rapid time control and the fact that it's chess 960, we can forgive him if the computer doesn't say it's like super accurate. Although I think it was. Let's see. I'm curious. Let's see. Is it going to show it? Someone's already run it, yeah? To see 20, was it saying 24? That's pretty low. And it's, roughly saying chess.com only gives you accuracy, which it doesn't tell you much. It's saying 90% accuracy. Pretty nice. Interesting, it's given Firouzja 80, but you see the significant difference in centipon loss in terms of, hundredths of a pawn, worse than the computer's best move on average. So 24 versus 35. So a little better for Magnus, but really it could be a blunder. The blunder could have cost Magnus a draw, but it cost Firouzja when Magnus gave up the win for one move, where it would become a draw, but then Firouzja just missed it. And so, but you see a very nice trajectory. That's usually if someone's cheating, you'll see that. This is Magnus. Now, if they're cheating and you see a smooth slope, that means that they're not. Because if they're making inaccurate moves, it'll be choppy since the computer would have found better moves than them. And then it's like, the eval dropped. But the eval never dropped much because he's Magnus, and amazingly, only one big mistake. Amazing. All right, well, I guess that's that. They're done, right? Yeah, because you won 2. So now they go on to semifinals. So who is that going to be between? I don't know. I didn't follow it. We have... we can see quickly the standings. Games. Or we could just look here. So what happened to the last ones? We got Aronian defeating Kamer. Carlsen. So I guess, we have draws between, I don't know. I guess, I'm not sure how that works. The tiebreak semifinal. I'm not sure where is it showing this? Could find it somewhere, but it should be right here. We have schedule. Is it going to be? We can click on the website briefly. Results. Reject. Can I reject, please? Fine. No, not accept all. Fine. Okay. Only essential, whatever. Okay. So we got... So it's going to be... Okay, because the other two were Abusatara. I haven't heard people pronounce it much. I don't know. And Caruana versus Aronian. And then so... I don't know, because Abusatara defeated Magnus, so it could be anyone there, because he's really good at 960, so it could be anyone. But let's say it's Magnus, and then, I don't know, I mean, I assume it would be, maybe it could be Magnus versus Caruana, because I'm pretty sure Caruana is stronger than Aronian. Now, Carlsen's obviously stronger, but, hey, I mean, Abusatara was very strong in 960. So, we'll see. Could be anyone, but I would guess it would be Carlsen versus Caruana. Let's find out. The 2 Cs.